Donna Mae Vinson took in the gruesome scene, and when she caught a glimpse of her daughter's feet on the floor near the bed, she immediately backed out of the bedroom, hoping her daughter would just raise up. This mother experienced one of the worst things a mother could experience. Hey crime babes, thank you for joining me here today. I'm your host Catherine, and today we are going to be talking about the gruesome murder of Tracy Holloway. I spoke with the retired detective who was a rookie cop on scene that day, and he is the main source of my information. He wants to remain anonymous, but I will play some audio clips from our interview. I am so grateful that he met with me. He told me this case continues to haunt him 28 years later, and he wants justice for the victim, Tracy. Trigger warning, viewer and listener discretion is strongly advised. On June 27th, 1997, around 9:45 a.m., Searcy, Arkansas resident Connie Allen heard a woman screaming and moments later spotted Donna Mae Vinson hysterical outside on the porch at 509 North Cross Street. Donna's daughter, Tracy Holloway, had not shown up to unlock the door of her hair salon, Best Impressions, like she normally did every morning. So her co-workers called the owner of the building, and he went down and unlocked the door for them. He then went to Tracy's home and knocked on the door and looked in the windows, but didn't get an answer. Eventually, Tracy's mother, Donna, was notified that her daughter had not shown up for work, and she went over to the house. After hearing Donna's screams, neighbor Connie Allen made the call, and ProMed ambulance service raced to the scene. Upon arriving, they found a horrifying sight. Tracy Holloway had been severely bludgeoned and left almost unrecognizable. Police arrived shortly after that, and ProMed warned them of the bloody scene awaiting them. When I sat down with the retired detective, he reflected on how gruesome this crime scene was and the impact this crime has had on him.
This case with Tracy it's always bothered me, always been in the back of my mind. It's pretty horrific. It was a horrific crime scene. A lot of blood, cast off, spatter everywhere. She was facing her attacker, got conked on the head, probably laid her out and beat her to death. He or she beat her to death.
He just could not stress enough how brutal and awful this crime scene was. The sheer amount of blood spatter and trauma to the victim's body has haunted him throughout his career. This, to him, was an obvious crime of passion with extreme emotion involved. Tracy had been struck so many times they couldn't count how many times. Now, this was not his first murder investigation, but it was his first crime scene of this magnitude. He said it was awful, messy, and just horrible.
You know, I do have my opinion who it was, and just lack of evidence.
What about the DNA?
Back then, DNA really wasn't, but they were able to secure a lot of evidence.
I was going to say, are they retesting that now?
They did. We resent it off, some items of clothing and stuff like that.
Okay,
and that's some of what we resent to the crime lab. It appeared that part of her house was cleaned, or whoever did it cleaned themselves up, because they would have had to have blood on them. So it's one that I would really like to see, through, because for me as a rookie, 6-month rookie, that was pretty horrific. It was always in the back of my mind, whether she's living or not. I would like to see that for her mother, just to know that justice was finally served.
My heart goes out to all law enforcement who must witness the aftermath of these types of brutal crimes. As if this case couldn't get any more horrendous, Tracy was actually celebrating her 30th birthday on the night of her death. On June 26th, that evening, she'd gone to the Elks Club with a girlfriend. She made it safely back home after a night of celebrating, but by morning, she was dead. There was no sign of forced entry, and investigators believe that she knew her attacker. Someone maybe she would have partied with that night and gone home with her, or maybe someone she let in later after she got home, but it was definitely someone she felt familiar enough to let into her home. She was found wearing nothing but an oversized t-shirt and her underwear. Now, there were a couple of odd things noticed at the crime scene. The first thing was a raised toilet lid, obvious signs that a man had used the toilet. There was speculation that someone in law enforcement investigating the scene carelessly used the toilet, but police pretty much ruled that theory out. They do believe that it was a man there with Tracy that night, and probably her attacker. Another thing noticed by Tracy's mom, actually, was a feminine product in the trash can that had not been properly wrapped up. It was as if Tracy was interrupted say maybe by a knock at the door when she rushed out to answer the door instead of properly disposing of the feminine product like her mother said she normally would have done. I have to give props to Tracy's mom, who obviously went through the house with a fine-tooth comb trying to find anything out of the ordinary. To me, that's a very keen observation. It might not mean anything, but it could be significant that maybe she had an unplanned visitor that night. I love knowing all these little details in a case. I think minor details are so important. Police started looking at everyone in Tracy's life that would have had access to her that evening. Several men were investigated, including her estranged husband. She was reportedly going through a separation, and her estranged husband was keeping their 2-year-old child so she could go out and celebrate her birthday that night. Tracy went out for her birthday, and even though they were separated earlier that day, Larry Holloway had dropped by Tracy's work at Best Impressions to bring her some flowers. Best Impressions was located on Lincoln Avenue, and quick side note I have to mention, on the corner of Lincoln and Main was the Washeteria where my Aunt Ruby was abducted way back in 1963. A small town coincidence I just couldn't help but mention. So anyway, Larry drops these flowers off to Tracy, apparently just wanting to wish her happy birthday. I don't know, maybe it was an olive branch. I know that her mother had stated in the press that they had some pretty nasty fights. I don't know why he was bringing her flowers, but he did, and she showed the flowers to her mother on her way home from work before she went out that evening. Later that night, Tracy went to the Elks Club with a girlfriend and then dropped her off when they were done, and it's assumed that she went back to her house right after that. Sometime that night or early Saturday morning, she was attacked. Her time of death was estimated to be around 2 to 5 a.m. I wonder if the neighbors saw anyone coming and going at that time. There are a lot of opinions out there on who could have done this to Tracy. In fact, when I was researching this case at the Searcy Library, a woman at the library recognized me as the author of my aunt's book, The Washeteria Mystery, and she approached me. We started talking, and I shared with her that I was working on Tracy's case, and then she stated to me that she knew without a doubt who committed this crime. She told me that Tracy was seeing a man in law enforcement and that there was this huge cover-up at the police department and that this man had done the crime. So I quickly called back the retired detective that I had just met with the hour prior, and I asked him if he'd heard this story. He told me he had heard idle speculation, and he confirmed that Tracy was in fact seeing this man in law enforcement, but this man wasn't listed as a suspect. Now, I don't know if he was ruled out by DNA, but he just said he was not a suspect. There was also a man who ran a business close to Tracy's salon that possibly had a crush on her, so police investigated him as well. From the reports online, it didn't appear that Tracy knew this man very well, and maybe he was kind of stuck on her. And I think that man was eventually ruled out. There was also another man that people talked about, and it was a close friend of Tracy's. I think that this friend had been her friend since high school, but he was happily married, and police pretty much ruled him out as well. I guess they were just looking at every male figure that she was close to at the time of her death. Police were completing every interview they could, but still nothing concrete was uncovered. Let's talk about the crime scene again. Investigators believe that the attack may have started in either the kitchen or the living room. They think Tracy was first knocked in the face, and then the attacker became even more enraged. At that point, they likely grabbed something to beat her with, and the fatal part of the attack happened in the bedroom. There was blood found pretty much all over the house in different places. The detective I talked to did say that he could tell that someone had tried to clean up the crime scene and maybe even showered at Tracy's. The murder weapon was not found, but police speculate it could have been a hammer, a pipe, a wrench, something that would have left that type of damage. It doesn't take too much to assume that this was a crime of passion and extreme rage. It looks like whoever went to Tracy's that night became angry and lost control. The detective told me that they could see tool marks in the footboard of Tracy's bed. So whoever was attacking Tracy was just swinging wildly, hitting everything in sight. And I think about the aftermath of this crime. The attacker would have been bloody. The car that they used to get away, the getaway car, would have been bloody. And so I wonder, did they ever check the estranged husband's car? I mean, surely they did. I did ask the detective that, and he said that he was unfortunately transferred shortly after Tracy's crime. And so he doesn't have all the particulars on the investigation after, but he assumes that car interiors were definitely looked into. The retired detective shared this photo photo with me of the crime scene reenactment he and his colleagues did with Tracy's body laying next to her bed in the bedroom. This was just one of the many things the team has done in piecing this puzzle together. Now, the detective has his own hunch on motive and who could have possibly done this to Tracy and been angry enough to do this, but of course he did not want to elaborate too much as to impede the investigation. I will be periodically checking in with him, and I will update anyone if there's any new developments in this case. I read online that police have taken DNA samples from 4 different people, and I am anxious to see what those results bring. My heart goes out to Tracy's son, who was just a toddler at the time that he lost his mother, and for all the family that have been missing her and trying to get answers all these years. And shout out to the retired detective for bringing this case to my attention and for giving me his time and energy on this case. I know it must have been so hard to revisit the trauma he endured at the crime scene that day, and I'm so grateful for his insight that he shared with me. Tracy's case is one that weighs heavily, and her story deserves to be remembered. Let's keep talking about Tracy and keep this case alive in the hope that whoever did this will be brought to justice. What are all your thoughts on this case? Are any of you from the Searcy, Arkansas area, and had you heard of this case? Let me know in the comments what you all think of this case. And if any of you have a case you would like me to cover here on Crimes with Catherine, please drop a comment, or you can always email me at crimeswithcatherine@gmail.com. Until next time, crime babes.